All right. Welcome, everybody. Big shout out to each of our locations. Thank you guys for being here with us. Want to welcome our Central Newcastle family this week, as well as Sunrise Mountain, Southern Highlands, Summerlin, Kingman, God Behind Bars locations, and different prison facilities, and those watching online. Grateful to have each and every one of you with us. Let's give it up for those guys joining us today. Well, we are continuing this teaching series called Staycation, looking at how we can all get sort of refreshed by the Big Ten in the Old Testament of the Bible, the 10 Commandments, God's 10 sort of moral principles that give us a framework for how to navigate life. And today we're at the 4th commandment, which is all about rest. You're going to be very glad you came. It's all about rest. Now, how many of you feel like you could use some sleep? How many of you use a little more rest? Isn't it interesting when you're little kids, like the way you're punished is by rest? I remember my parents would tell me, if you keep acting up, you're gonna get sent to your room and you're gonna have to lie in your bed. And it was punishment, right? I remember I used to go to this little daycare facility, and both my parents worked, and at this daycare facility, there was nap time in the afternoon. And so we'd get a little cookie and a little Kool-Aid, who knows what they put in the Kool-Aid, and then you were supposed to lay down and everybody was supposed to take a nap. And all I remember from my childhood is how much I hated nap time. I'm just laying there the whole time staring up at the ceiling thinking, when is it over, when is it over, when is it over? So I can get out and have some fun. Punishment was resting. Time out was laying down in bed. And then you get to be an adult. And now you want nothing more than for somebody to come along and put you in time out, right? Nap time would be glorious. It's like, I would love to have to take a nap. That'd be awesome. When you become parents, man, when you have little kids, sleep is out the window. Some of you are there right now trying to navigate that season. I remember as our little kids began to grow up, they would come into our room in the middle of the night and climb in our bed. And we would try to break this habit. And we eventually were able to do this with our daughter, but with our son, he was more stubborn. He was more willful. He just kept coming in. Didn't matter what we did. We read the books. We tried the techniques just to get him to stay in his bed. Because when he came into our bed and climbed in bed, he would play a soccer match in his dreams every night. He's running, he's kicking, he's throwing his fists all around. Can anybody relate to what I'm saying? I'm getting hit in the face. I need protection, if you know what I'm saying. I mean, it's not good. I'm up all night long because my little guy is just going and going and going. I remember one day he sat up in the morning, and this is literally what he said. He goes, "I slept great. Isn't that amazing?" I remember I'm sitting there and I've been beaten up all night long, and I'm like, I didn't sleep at all, and that's not very amazing. And so one day Lori and I finally said, look, we've had enough. We've tried everything we know to do. We've read all the books. We've talked to him. We've tried to get him to stay in his room. We tried to lock the door, but then you feel like you're abusive parents. And so finally we said, we're gonna buy a smaller bed. I woke up on a Saturday morning after not sleeping all night, and that's exactly what we did. We went down to the store. We downsized. You're supposed to upsize as you get older. We downsized. We got a smaller bed, set it all up in our master bedroom, and then brought Ethan in, stood him beside the bed, and said, "Little Ethan, look, buddy, I don't know what happened. The big bed's gone. All we have now is the little bed. You don't fit anymore in the little bed. There's no space for you." And he kind of listened to that, and then he still came in about 2 a.m. Here he comes, his little feet. He starts climbing up in that bed, and he realized there's nowhere to lay in this bed. I'm laying on Dad's arm. This isn't good. He can't go to sleep. So eventually he leaves, and we're thinking this is victory, except he goes to his sister's room now and climbs in her bed. She can't sleep either. She starts complaining about it. So would you believe we actually broke down and finally bought her a bigger bed? So we got a smaller bed, she got a bigger bed, and we're like, you guys fight it out, have fun. We're just trying to get some sleep. I remember once, 2 a.m, I'll never forget, Emma starts screaming in the middle of the night, "Help, help, help." And every parent, when you hear help, goes into parent rescue mode. And I jumped up, I run down the hall. I'm like, my heart's beating a million miles an hour. I throw her door open in her room. I turn the light on, and there she is. I don't know, maybe 8 years old. "Help." And she's sitting there with her finger like this. And she looks at me, and this is what she says: "Booger, booger, there's a booger on my finger." And I remember just standing there like, you woke me up at 2 a.m. because there's a booger on your finger, So I grabbed the thing off her finger. I'm like, go back to bed. I remember walking out thinking if that was a boy, he'd just eat it. But it's a girl, and I'm up at 2:30 in the morning. But as a parent, it's hard to sleep. It's hard to rest. Studies show that back in 1850, the average person in civilized cultures got about 10 hours of sleep a night. 10 hours of sleep. Can you even imagine? Studies show today that the average person in civilized cultures gets about 6 to 6.5 hours of sleep a night, and it's getting progressively less. And yet sleep is exactly what we need. Rest is what we need. You're 2 to 3 times more likely to get sick when you're exhausted and worn out, when you're not getting enough sleep. And so I want to talk to you about rest, but not just rest like getting more sleep. I want to talk to you about soul rest, about soul siesta. Now a siesta, that's from a certain culture where you take a nap in the afternoon. Some of us may feel like we need a nap, but what we really need is something more. We need for God to fill our soul from the bottom all the way up and to help transform our hearts and our lives. That's what the fourth commandment is really all about. So if you have your Bibles and want to follow along, we're going to be in Deuteronomy chapter 5, beginning in verse 12. Deuteronomy chapter 5. And we're going to look at this command that God gives to the Israelites. We looked at the first 3 commands over the last several weeks, and we've been talking about how, look, these are principles for our lives, where our salvation, our forgiveness, our hope is ultimately in Jesus and what he has done, not in how good we are or how well we keep the rules. But these rules and principles can empower us to live a life with sort of maximum satisfaction and minimum regret. Minimum regret. And so you get to Deuteronomy chapter 5, verse 12. When we get to the red word, I'm going to ask you to read it out loud with me and help me out here. Here's what it says. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it what? Holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. Now, Sabbath in the Hebrew language is just a term that meant Saturday. And so they were to take Saturday as the day that they were to keep holy, they were to set it aside, and they were to rest, to allow God to fill them up. It's a principle that God himself engages in all throughout the Bible, even from the very beginning. We see that after creation on the 7th day, what does God do? God rests. He doesn't rest because he's tired, because he's worn out. He's God, right? He doesn't get tired and worn out. He rests to set the model for us. And rest in the ancient world was actually, in that context, seen as like you rested when all your work was done. And so God, after creation, his work was done. He sits, he rests, he models it for us. There's a rhythm that God has wired into creation. There's a rhythm. And that rhythm is 6 days you work, but one day, the 7th day, you rest and you allow God to fill you back up. And I would suggest, as a principle, this is probably one of the most violated principles in our culture today, even by believers. I've wrestled with this. We grind it out 7 days a week. We go. We even think it's more holy or we're more committed if we continue to work and push through. And yet, I want to argue that you can get more done in a week if you take a day of rest consistently than you can if you work 7 straight days a week every week. So first principle is this. If you want to basically be your best, you've got to invest in God's rest. So pick a day. Pick a day. A day, any day of the week where you will rest. Now, for the Jewish people, it was Saturday. That was the Sabbath, literally. It was the holy day they set aside. But as you read through the Bible, you see that in the New Testament, it says we've entered into Jesus' rest through salvation, through what he's accomplished for us. It's no longer so much about which day it is. It's more about honoring the principle of picking a day. That's why in the early church, the early believers in Jesus celebrated the Sabbath on Sunday. And they took that as the day of rest. Whatever day it is, pick a day. Pick a day. Now, I'm going to bring an image up that goes back to my childhood. You may or may not relate to this, but there was a commercial that came on a lot when I was growing up with Kool-Aid Man in it. And I don't know if you guys remember Kool-Aid Man, but Kool-Aid Man would show up, and it was a Kool-Aid commercial, and he would always say these words, "Oh yeah." Any of you remember Kool-Aid Man? A few of you? Yeah, okay. Kool-Aid Man, come on. This is what he looked like right here. We actually don't have an image. I'm just going to show it on my little thing of Kool-Aid right there. Can you see his face right there? This is cherry Kool-Aid. How many of you like cherry Kool-Aid? You want some cherry Kool-Aid? Yeah, well, this is a prop. You have to see me after. Cherry Kool-Aid. So think about life. Think about all the things that we do in life. I've got a little display up here, 4 different cups. Each one of these cups represents a different part of our life. Let's say we've got work, and Monday comes along, or whenever the first of your work week begins, and so you jump in and you pour yourself into Monday, and you give yourself at work, and you serve other people, you do what needs to be done, you balance the bills, you sell things, whatever it is, and there's Monday. And then you get home and you've got family, all the family dynamics, and you love your family. You want to serve them. Then you've got laundry and the never-ending dishes, and you got the dog to feed and all those kind of things to do. And then over here you've got health. You want to look good, live long, so you go to the gym, you work out, you do your thing, you exercise, awesome. And then lastly, we've got dreams and hobbies. You got some dreams, some hobbies. It is the smallest cup, but it's there. And so there it is. It takes 7 days. You plow through it all, and there's the week. And then the next week starts, and you're like, all right, bring it on. You go to work, they need some overtime. You need the money, no problem. You get home, there's family drama, but you got it covered. There's a few things going on, but you can do it. And then you get to the gym, and so you hit the gym. You're being faithful. You keep working out. You got a little bit left over for dreams and hobbies. Week 2, that's awesome. There we go. Then week 3 comes along. All right, here we go. We're back at work. We're grinding it out at work, and then we go home, and now we got a little bit left at home, and then we'll skip the gym, and then forget the dream, and now we're back to work. Here we are, we're at work, and then not much of home life going on here, and back to work. Here we are. Now we're just working, and it's like we just got nothing left, right? There's nothing in the tank, and we wonder why we fight so much at home. You wonder why at home, when you get home, and you just bring up one little thing that needs to be fixed around the house, he kind of goes ape nuts and has a meltdown because he's got nothing left in the tank. Fix your own freaking ceiling fan. I can't fix it. I got nothing left, right? You wonder why when you bring one little thing up, she's like, you know what? I can't do anymore. If you could just wash this out. Look, I can't do any more laundry. Our kid's been wearing the same underwear for 3 days. It is what it is. I'm tired. I'm worn out. Now here's the deal. We all get to these kind of places in our life, and I think we often feel like, I just need to be filled up. I just need to be filled up. Sabbath is not a day for you to fill yourself up. Sabbath is a day where you allow God to fill you up. You can't do it on your own. You allow God to fill you up. Why? Because the next week's coming, and you got to have something that you can give here and here and here and here. And so Sabbath is that day that we set aside and we say, all right, God, fill me up today. Give me the energy and the strength that I need. Give me the perspective. Help me remember what's most important. Work in my heart and in my life. In fact, look at this. Deuteronomy chapter 5, beginning in verse 12, says this. It says, you have 6 days each week for your ordinary work. There it is. 6 days for all the ordinary stuff, okay? But the 7th day is a Sabbath day of rest dedicated to the Lord your God. It's dedicated to God. It's a day you set aside for him. I want to suggest to you that for some of you, the most powerful thing that you could do, not only for your spiritual life, but for your emotional and physical longevity and health, is today to look out and pick a day that's going to be your Sabbath. Every day this summer, each week as you move along. Every day this season in your life, each week as you move along. Pick a day. Some of you are like, I don't have a day, man. Have you seen my cups? That's not even half my cups. There is no day. But listen, this is one of those areas where I would say you can't afford not to. It's like generosity. You know, people say, look, I can't be generous. I can't give back to God. I don't have enough to go around as it is. You don't get more until you get generous and begin to share the little you have, and then God gives more to you in your life. You find that 90% with you and God is more than 100% on your own. You find that 6 days of work and a day of rest with you and God is more than 7 days of work on your own. And so it doesn't always make sense. And some of us look at our lives and we're like, man, I can't do that. But you can. And if you do, I believe you'll eventually find that you not only accomplish more, but you accomplish it longer than you ever would have before. There's a pace, there's a rhythm God has set up. I remember when I was working for my dad one summer in college, and I was on this construction site, and the construction manager grabbed me and another old gentleman, and he said, each of you guys grab a shovel. He goes, took me over to this space. He says, I need you to dig a hole here, and I need you to dig a hole here. He says, this is gonna be a rectangular hole. It was deep. It was more than 6 feet deep, and it was early in the morning. He says, it's gonna take you all day. He says, we can't get equipment back here. You gotta dig this hole, and you gotta dig this hole. And so he kind of marked off the hole where it was, and I have my shovel, and I looked over at this old man. I thought, he can't dig this hole. He's gonna die. But I thought, I'll show him how it's done. So I got my shovel and I started going, right? You know, and I got my little scoop, and, you know, then I went over and dumped it, and I got mine. I was like 3 scoops into his one. I'm like, look at this old man, you know, because he was like whistling. I remember whistling. I can't really whistle. You have to fill it in for me. And then he'd go over and he'd push that shovel down, and he got into a rhythm, you know, and then he'd kind of walk over, he'd dump that dirt, right? He'd go back over, put that shovel down, you know. He's just kind of moving along. I'm like, man, I'm gonna school you. So here I go, I'm shoveling, man. I'm gonna have this hole done by lunch. I'll tell you what happened. By lunch, I had nothing left. I was gassed. I was exhausted. And I remember sitting there totally exhausted, and I was slightly ahead of him, but the old man was barely sweating. And he goes back over to the hole, and he looks over at me like, rookie. He's got that rhythm, right? 2 o'clock in the afternoon comes around. I'm like walking around seeing who I can bribe to help me finish the hole. That old man, he's still going. He's got that rhythm. He's got no sweat. He's just rocking along, and this keeps happening. And by 5 o'clock in the afternoon, my hole isn't finished. His hole is perfect. And he sets that shovel down and looks at me, winks at me, and walks off. And I never forget what I learned that day. There is a wisdom to a rhythm, to a pace. That old man knew you can go at this thing 100 miles an hour, son, but you gotta go all day long. You gotta pace yourself. Some of you, if you don't get into a rhythm, you're gonna wreck your life, your soul, your family, the things that matter most. God has set up a rhythm, so pick a day. Pick a half a day. Some seasons you may not have a day, but do the best you can to lock in a day. Put it on your calendar, say, this is the day where I rest. Yeah, there's a lot of demands. Yeah, there's a lot of things going on, but this is the day. This is the half a day where I set it aside. And then the second principle is this: learn what fills you. Learn what fills you and engage in that. Check this out. Deuteronomy chapter 5, beginning in verse 13. Gives us some more detail about this day. It says, on that day, no one in your household may do any work. Come on, moms. This includes you, your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your oxen and donkeys and other livestock, and any foreigners living among you. All your male and female servants must rest as you do. So here's the idea. This is like a day off for everybody. Like if dad chores don't fill you up, you don't have to do dad chores. If laundry is a nightmare, you don't do laundry on your day of rest, right? You got to give yourself to things that fill you up. God even says, look, even the oxen get time off. Even the animals got time off. Why? Because that was the means of production. And so if they could work those animals, they would work them, right? They would find a way. So God says, even the animals get time off. Let me suggest that today that may look something like this. Even the computer gets time off. Even Even your mobile device gets time off. Ooh. Even social media gets time off. Even the text message gets time off. Even like there's a time for some of us where our mode of production is our phone. That's what we live on. That's what we always are engaging with. And I understand when you're on, you have to be on. And like me, some of you are in jobs where it's not really 9 to 5. Anything can happen at any time of the day, and I pick up, right? You know, God called me this week. I answered the phone. He's like, you answered the phone. I'm like, that's what I do. Some of you are there. You get it. That's what you do, right? You don't know what's coming on the other end, but you grab it because that's what you do. But we got to have seasons in our life. We need a day where you just turn that phone off. Text people around you and say, don't call me today. If it's 911, call my wife. She'll get to me. But I got to turn this off, right? Because I'm not in this for the sprint. I'm in it for the marathon. That's something different. I'm not in this for the short term, right? I'm trying to stay in life, my family, work, health for the long term. And to do that, I got to have perspective and rhythm and balance. What fills you? What fills you? It's going to be different for all of us. For some of you, that'll be being around other people. That fills you up. That excites you. For those of you that are introverts, just being at church is already draining you. Just being around all these people, smelling them, knowing they're there, it's already, affecting you, right? That's who you are. So maybe you need a day alone if that's you. You need to get away if that's you. For some of you, you get out in nature and it's like, oh man, I just feel like God is here. God is present. For others of you, you get out in nature and you just, feel like you need some kind of mosquito repellent and that's about it. Like, there's nothing there because we're all wired up differently. For some of you, it's music. I love to play guitar. Like on my day off, which for me are like Friday mornings and Saturday mornings. Those are my two little windows that I try to carve out. And I do two things in those windows. I play music because it's like my thing that I love to do. I'm no good at it, but it doesn't matter. I enjoy it. And it helps me disconnect. And I read. I like to read books about God and faith that challenge me and stimulate me. It fills me up. What fills you up? Not just in general, but also spiritually. What's going to help you feel more connected to God and feel stronger? That's what the Sabbath is all about. So pick a day. Find what fills you. And then thirdly, just recover your life. Recover your life. I saw these Twitter posts that were pretty funny. It was a hashtag that somebody had started that was all about dates that had gone bad. How to escape a bad date. Here's the first one. Person says, I just hold up a picture of my mom and say, meet the competition. That's how to escape a bad date. All right, here's another one. This person just says, no matter what he's talking about being, in the conversation, just bring it back around to your cat. Him, I love travel. Me, my cat's an explorer. How to escape a bad day. All right, here's one more. Randomly tell her to cut down on the carbs. Yeah, you're gonna die. You're not just gonna get out of the date, you may get out of life if that's what you do. How to escape a bad day. Well, the Sabbath to the Israelites was in part challenging them to remember that they had gone through a bad season and that now they were in a different season. Listen to this, Deuteronomy chapter 5, beginning in verse 15. He says, remember that you were once slaves in Egypt. But the Lord your God brought you out with his strong hand and powerful arm. That is why the Lord your God has commanded you to rest on the Sabbath day. Now here's why this is so important. Slaves didn't get a day off. Slaves didn't get to rest. This was 1 million+ people coming out of slavery. And here's what God's saying. Look, he's basically forbidding slavery. He's saying everybody takes a day off. It was a whole new way of framing up life and reality for these individuals who had came through so much. Because he knows our temptation sometimes is to go backwards to our old way of life, to go backwards to our old habits. And so listen to what Jesus says, Matthew 11:28. He just sort of bottom lines it this way. Matthew 11:28, he says, are you tired? You worn out? He says, are you burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll what? Recover your life. You wanna recover your life? Jesus says, come to me. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Isn't that beautiful? Jesus is like, I'll show you how to rest. Look at this. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I love that. We all need to walk in the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Jesus is saying, come along with me on a spiritual journey. Hang out with me. I'll show you how to live freely and lightly. You don't have to live in worry. You don't have to live in fear. You don't have to walk around always trying to fulfill the needs of other people. Sometimes we're always sort of pouring out because we're afraid, and we think we're afraid of failure, but deep down we're actually afraid of rejection. And Jesus is saying, look, I'll forgive you and heal you, and I will move in your life where that fear of rejection begins to be removed because you are accepted by a God who loves you and cares for you. And so you don't have to do it on your own. I mean, every night when we go to bed and we close our eyes, something happens that should probably, it's so basic, but it should probably be more significant to us than it often is. Every night when we close our eyes, we should remember that we're not God. We're about to go offline for 6+ hours, right? I mean, we have no idea what's going on, but you know what? The universe still moves. God still works. You can take your cares and your worries to God because he's gonna be up all night anyway, and then you can go to sleep. And the same thing happens in the rhythm of a week. You could take a day and you can give it to God. And you say, I don't know, but what if I don't have enough money? God will provide for his people. But what if I don't have enough stuff? God will take care of the stuff. But what if I can't get it all done? God will help you get done what you can never get done in your own strength and in your own power. So you set aside that day and you say, God, I'm making it holy to you. I'm gonna dedicate it to you. Maybe I'm gonna read your word. Maybe I'm gonna listen to worship. Maybe I'm gonna engage spiritually in conversation. Definitely I'm gonna get to church. Many of you, you're here right now at church because this is your day. You've set aside to worship. But after church is over, your worship doesn't have to end. You can still engage in things that fill you spiritually and help you feel close to God. And that's gonna serve you in your work. It's gonna help you go further in your career. It's gonna impact your marriage. You're gonna fight less and love more. It's gonna help you deal with bitterness and unforgiveness. That's gonna help you in your health. It might actually motivate you to make some changes from a health standpoint, and that will help you continue to pursue the dreams and the passions that God has put in your heart and in your life. It's the most violated commandment, probably of all of them, but one of the most important principles. Remember the Sabbath, the day of rest, and keep it holy in your life. Let's bow and pray together. God, we thank you for your love. We're grateful for who you are, and we thank you for all that you give us in our lives. God, I thank you for the privilege that we have to take a day of rest, for the permission that you give us to set aside a day to recuperate and remember who you are and to rejuvenate our own heart and life. And I pray that in this season, in each of our lives, you'll motivate us and inspire us to take the steps we need to pick a day in our lives, to set aside that time, to find what fills us and to give ourselves to that, to recover our lives as we follow you in faith. Teach us those rhythms of grace so that we can walk in them each day in our lives. We give you praise in Christ's name. Amen.